This metabolic efficiency test is based on an athlete who came to me, and she was 47-year-old female, perimenopausal. So she did not have a defined menstrual cycle, and an ultra runner. So a runner who was training for 100-mile running races. Now, here's the interesting thing I just want to start with. There's a lot of press that's being put out there, social media and whatnot, that women always burn more fat during exercise. There's nothing more false about that statement because everybody is different. I've tested some females who were extremely efficient burning fat, and some females, like you see here, who were extremely inefficient at burning fat. So it's extremely unfair to classify a gender as being able to burn more fat or more carbohydrate or vice versa, or whatever. It's just false. Until you do a metabolic efficiency test, until you kind of pop the hood and look inside what's going on, and the effect of exercise and nutrition, you cannot answer the question. What does, does a female burn more fat than a male or whatever, or even does a female burn more fat during different menstrual cycles or development? So it's very hard to answer that question without testing, but I will tell you 100%, based on the testing that I've done, metabolic efficiency testing, that statement is 100% false because everybody is so different. So let me go into this test on the 47-year-old female ultra runner. As you can see, from the data table below there, we documented a few things. So the time indicates the stage time. So how many minutes were spent in each stage. So these were 4-minute stages. The test went 16 minutes and it started at 6 miles per hour, ended at 6.9 miles per hour. We have pace in minutes per mile. We started at 10-minute mile pace, went down to 8:42, and heart rate ranged from 146 to 164. And we did measure rating of perceived exertion on a scale of 1 to 10, because for ultra runners, that's pretty important to note, just that subjective measurement. Now, above, we see two lines. The black line indicates the percent carbohydrates being oxidized or burned for energy, and the red line indicates the percent fat being oxidized or burned for energy. Now, obviously, there are no crosses of the lines, so there is no metabolic efficiency point. And this was really interesting because you look at an ultra runner, and one of the goals of ultra runners is to actually be more efficient at using their fat stores because of the length of a 100-mile or more run. They want to preserve carbohydrate stores as much as possible, right? Because ultra runners usually have to carry their food, or much of their food. They can't always rely on aid stations. And so it just behooves an ultra runner or any ultra endurance athlete to be more metabolically efficient or fat efficient, and preserving carbohydrate stores. Now, with her particularly, she was not having great races, and was kind of doing the bonking and not feeling good and fatigued, and just everything was just not feeling good. Now, granted, she is perimenopausal, so there are some hormonal fluxes happening. But from a nutrition perspective, after kind of peeking in and looking at her daily nutrition plan, she consumed a very high quantity of carbohydrate relative to protein and fat. So her ratio usually was right around a 3-to-1 or even a 4-to-1 at times. So 3 parts carbohydrate to 1 part protein, or 4 parts carbohydrate to 1 part protein. Both of those are not the greatest at stabilizing blood sugar. So by following that type of nutrition plan, daily nutrition plan, what she was doing was teaching her body to burn through her very limited carbohydrate stores very quickly. So she had to actually consume more carbohydrates during the day. It's actually a very vicious cycle. Now, again, carbohydrates are certainly not bad, but putting it in context with her, because she's an ultra runner, 100-mile plus runner, she needed to be more efficient at using her carbohydrate stores, right? She didn't, what the goal was not for her to use 76 to 86% of her carbohydrate stores at very easy paces for her, by the way, right? The goal was for her to use more fat at those lower intensity paces. So what we did from a daily nutrition perspective was we periodized her carbohydrate to protein ratio. And specifically, we looked at opportunities to mostly follow a 2-to-1 carbohydrate to protein ratio because to be honest with you, that's the place to start for most people, right? When in doubt, start at a 2-to-1. It stabilizes blood sugar beautifully. It usually gives enough energy or enough calories to satisfy training and health needs, but also recovery needs. And it doesn't really affect the body's ability in terms of preserving or burning through more carbohydrate stores. It's actually really good at teaching the body to burn more fat. So, our main goal was to follow a 2-to-1 ratio as much as possible every day of the week. Now, of course, there would be some times where she would consume more carbohydrates, and that was fine. But what I was getting at with her was 90% of the time, so most days of the week, she would follow a 2-to-1 ratio. Now, we did offer a little bit of wiggle room, right? Where I call those misses. So maybe she would have a meal that's a miss here and there, and maybe it was a little bit more carbohydrate. That was totally fine. But what I taught her was when that happens, you want to bounce back quickly and go right back to your 2-to-1 ratio, not let that 3-to-1 ratio meal, say it was a dinner out with friends or something like that, or a couple glasses of wine that was unexpected, anything like that. You don't want to let that continue to bring you down, meaning you don't want to let it continue to you consuming a 3-to-1 ratio. So what I told her was if that happens, it's fine, minimize it, make sure it doesn't happen frequently, but bounce back on the next meal and make sure you're dialing in the 2-to-1. Now, my nutrient timing strategy, so during runs, well, and now this was her base training, so it wasn't too applicable, but she wasn't really getting into a lot of volume or intensity, obviously. But what I did with her was anything under 2 hours of training, we completely had her just drinking water and electrolytes. Now, the caveat to that was she was fed before the runs, right? So she had some carbohydrate, had a little bit of protein. So she went in with not full energy stores, but somewhat full energy stores. And her blood sugar was stable going into the runs, into the training. And then up to 2 hours, nothing but water and electrolytes. Over 2 hours, she would feed normally based on her performance needs. So whatever she normally consumed, which at that point were carbohydrate rich gels. Now, because they didn't bother her stomach and everything was safe from a GI system. So what we see here is most of the work that I put in with her regarding her nutrition strategy was daily nutrition, periodizing carbohydrate and protein because her ratio was so far off in the beginning. We needed to bring it down a little bit closer to each other. And that's why we chose the 2-to-1 carb to protein ratio. That alone will help her succeed. And what we want to see is taking her from this level 1 metabolic efficiency level to a level 2, which indicates she would have a metabolic efficiency point, even if it's early on. And that usually can be done in about 2 to 3 months, as long as the athlete pays attention to the plan, implements the plan, and stays about 90% on the plan. It is absolutely achievable going from a level 1 metabolic efficiency, which you see here, to a level 2 in the period of a couple months.